I think the water profession, as one of the speakers mentioned, not many major politicians are speaking about water. Why? I'll tell you one anecdote. One of my early mentors was Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi. And whenever I used to be in Delhi, she used to invite me and we used to talk. And I remember one conversation in 1975. She looked at me like an elder sister and said, Asit, when I listen to you, I get the impression the sun and the moon and all the planets revolve around water. I have to tell you, I am the Prime Minister of India. I have absolutely no interest in water. Okay? I was horrified. I said, Indiraji, how is it possible? Blah, blah. Without water, human being cannot live. We can't produce food. All these things. She said, if you want to discuss water as it is, I'll be happy to ask my secretary to make an appointment with the water minister or the chairman of the Central Water Commission. And when they know that I am interested, they will give you the red carpet and you will talk to your heart's content about water. But please, when you discuss, don't bring the water into discussion. So I said, I don't want to talk to the water minister. I want to talk to you. She said, if you want to talk to me, think as a prime minister what I'm interested in. And she said, I'm interested in India's economic development. How do I increase employment in the country? How do I improve the quality of life and the standard of living of the Indian people? So if you want to discuss water, try to frame it in a way so that water becomes an engine for regional development, employment generation, and improving standard of life, standard of living. And since then, I basically gave up. If you now talk about water efficiency, etc., I'm not that interested. I know it is important, but I want to discuss how water improves. And when you frame it that way, the politicians listen. Okay? So one of the things I've been suggesting is the water professionals need to change our mindset. The keynote lecture said reimagining Brahmaputra. I'll say reimagine water management. And the objective should be not an efficient water management or distribution, but how water can act as a catalyst for improving the lifestyle of all Indians, create employment, and improve the economic development of the country. So that is the first thing. Second item I would like to share with you is both India and Bangladesh is now, both of them have, I'm sorry to say this, terrible water management practices, absolutely terrible, which should have been jettisoned at least a century ago. Okay? Because of poor management, a country like India already has water scarcity in most parts of the world. That is even before climate change became a major factor. Now it is even worse. And then, if we look at the economic plans in India, by 2047, under Viksit Bharat, India's GDP is supposed to increase 10 times what it is today. Okay? Where if you increase 10 times, there's going to be a lot of industrial development. India's population is increasing, food is necessary, electricity is necessary, and no electricity can be produced without water. So if we can't handle even water, with a 4 trillion economy at present, how can you handle 40 trillion economy if it is possible in 21 years? It doesn't make sense. So we have to look at how we change water management completely. I like the keynote lecturers reimagining. So I'm now helping Niti Aayog to reimagine India's water management. Otherwise, there is no hope. There is no way we can produce enough electricity. There is no way we can produce food with the current poor water management practices. And the third thing I would like to say is the world is changing very rapidly. The rules of transboundary rivers are now being thrown out of the window. Only 3 weeks ago, President Trump told Mexican president that unless you release so many million cubic meters of water from the Colorado River, we will increase the tariff to 25%. Okay, this is not negotiations, and as the Canadian Prime Minister said last week in Davos, it's become the world's rule-based economy is collapsing. So we have to think about how we can manage water in a transboundary setting under new conditions, which may last I don't know how many years, but it will last for some time. So it's no point saying that we should follow the international rules of transboundary river management, because the strong are not going to listen to it. They do whatever they want, and the weak will have to follow. Now, next point I'd like to make is Brahmaputra is now probably only river, only untapped river in both in China, India, and Bangladesh. It's got untapped water resources. It's the only river which has so much water available, which are not being used for a variety of reasons. So how do we make Brahmaputra river of economic benefit to the country? And when we say economic benefit, it means environmental benefit, social benefit, all types of benefits together. How do we do that? And that is where one of the main problems we were facing in transboundary water management. Emadul mentioned, and Ambassador Tarek mentioned, the Ganga Treaty is over this year, okay? Why is no one in India or Bangladesh or China or Pakistan doing any research anywhere how to design a living treaty? Okay, India was a very different country 30 years ago when the Ganga Water Treaty was signed. Bangladesh was a very different country 30 years ago. And we followed the same treaty for 30 years. It should have been adjusted depending on the need, how the needs change. Indus Water Treaty, I've been saying for a long time, has been obsolete. It's been hindering development in India and Pakistan. But until some crisis occurs, there was no attempt to revise the treaty, or no attempt by any scholar to see how the Indus Water Treaty or any treaty could be written, which would have a clause somewhere that it has to be revised continually, every 5 years, 10 years, etc. And India has a special problem because of interstate rivers. Emadul mentioned the Tista one. Yes, of course. The central government wanted to go with the Tista Treaty, but the Chief Minister of West Bengal said no. And in India, water is a state subject. The state center cannot force provinces, Indian provinces, to follow what it wants. And the other problem in India, we have interstate river dispute. I have said it quite clearly now that Interstate River Dispute Act was written in 1956. Okay, 1956. We are now in 2026. It has never been changed, and it is not surprisingly, it's been completely obsolete for a very long time. What is happening now, the two states in India fight over a river as if like two different countries. Any river, both wanting more water, which the river does not have, and they don't understand. And the major problem in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan is the time horizon for planning is no more than 4 years. The politicians come into power for a 4-year period, and once they get in, they have a very short period, and the water problems cannot be solved within a 4-year time slot. It needs 20, 30 years of planning and consistent planning and funding so that the problems are solved. So I don't see, irrespective of all the good expertise India, Bangladesh, Pakistan has, unfortunately, I don't see a bright future of any other countries, of any of these 3 countries, because of water scarcity. On top of that, all these 3 countries are now in gung-ho on creating data centers, creating chip factories, which all need not only enormous amount of water, but most people do not realize in order to manufacture chips, we need water that is of a much better quality than drinking water, and which we've been polluting left, right, and center. All our rivers are polluted, groundwater is polluted, and yet the politicians think we have to follow the West. And one of the main problem I think India, Bangladesh, Pakistan has, we are following the Western modes and Western patterns to manage water. The Dutch and the Danes and the Norwegians and the Swedes made integrated water resources management a UN SDG, okay? And nobody asked anyone in India. India said that we should have a IWRM plans for the provinces. Nobody asked once, is IWRM applicable in India? The Dutch, all these Western small countries, they have not been able to do it in their countries, IWRM. But they're pushing IWRM because it creates job for their consultants. They sell equipment, they sell education, and create a clientele in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, who say IWRM is the nirvana. So what we have to do in India is to decide what is appropriate for us. In 2000, China decided that Chinese solutions, including water, must follow Chinese characteristics, okay? And they spend enormous amount of money doing research to find solution with Chinese characteristics. So they came out with, they call the river chief system. It will not work in India unless we manage it. It is the most disintegrated water resources management you can think of. Each river chief, who is the political chief of the province or the town or the municipality, is responsible for only that small part of river. He or she doesn't care what happens upstream or downstream. And you are evaluated. If you are mayor of Shanghai, the party's disciplinary committee evaluates how you kept your portion of water safe. If you can't keep it safe, you're out, you're history. Okay? So the river chip system has completely revolutionized China's water management. They have completely eliminated the class 4, class 5 water completely. Class 3 water, which is medium pollution, they're about to finish it off in the next 5-year plan. And they're making remarkable progress by developing their own solutions, which works under their own conditions, under their political and climatic conditions. And India has to do the same. Look at India's national water policy. And I know, Anamika, you were part of the last revision of this, which never went through. From 1980 on, the national water policy says we should have river basin organization from last 40 years. How many river basin organizations have been created in India? 0. Are one of them are they being discussed? No. Just because the West thinks this is the way to go, we have followed the Western tradition. And the West does not have the Indian monsoon conditions. So the question is, how do we start water management, not only in Brahmaputra, but other parts of the world, other parts of India, under Indian monsoon conditions, when all the rain falls in 4 to 5 months, and the rest of the year we don't have anything. In London, in England, every month we have rainfall. Delhi has more rainfall than London, but the highest soil moisture in London is lower than the lowest soil moisture. No, highest soil moisture in Delhi is lower than the lowest soil moisture in UK. So we have to start thinking about how do we develop our water management to feed our Indian conditions. And we talked a lot about the data in Brahmaputra. I'm sorry. You are not going to get any data because much of the data in Brahmaputra is not with the Indian Ministry of Water Resources, the Ministry of Defense. Okay? Water flow, many of these are Ministry of Defense. Same goes in China, the People's Liberation Army, because of the sensitivity, they have all the data. In the Ministry of Water Resources in China, do not have access to the data. Neither has the Ministry of Water Resources in India. Okay? So it will be very difficult to get data. We can talk about saying data compatibility, but the fact is, by Indian regulations, data on transboundary rivers are state secrets. So they are not going to put it so that everybody has access to it. So those are the real problems. Instead of saying data is a problem, in fact, these days data are not a problem. Someone mentioned about looking at what is happening in the different parts of the Brahmaputra basin. Well, at least India and China, they have their own remote sensing, the satellites. They can get good picture of what is happening in Brahmaputra basin in China, and Chinese can do the same. And in Bangladesh, I don't know about the satellite system, but if they don't have, you have access to NASA and all those photographs where you can get and see what is actually happening, and you can't hide it anymore. So we need to start thinking about real issues, real problems. And the other thing, we talk about collaboration. It is not easy. It's not easy because when the Chinese said they're going to build a major hydropower dam in the Brahmaputra bend, many major Indian media said that becomes a weapon. Well, the fact is only 16% of Brahmaputra water comes from China. Even by a miracle, Chinese managed to store all that water It won't make any difference to India because it is the other 84%. And no country can hold all the water. So instead of saying what other people are going wrong, we need to think about what we need to do in the Brahmaputra basin. India is very late to develop Brahmaputra river and its tributaries. Very late. China has gone gung-ho. I've been advising the Chinese government since 1980 when Deng Xiaoping asked me to come and review the south to north water transfer scheme. I've been advising them since then continuously. And believe me, one of the major advantage is long-term planning. They don't have to worry about 4-year election cycle. And all the water minister, vice minister, etc., they're all technocrats. They have been technocrats. They know what are the problems, they know what are the solutions, and they are the brightest some of the brightest you can find. So once they made the plan in 1980 on the water transfer, they spent around at least $100 billion, and the funding was coming regular. There's no problem. So we need some way to do that. And one of the problems we have, at least in India, the average stay of a water utility manager, say Delhi Jal Board or Chennai Jal Board or Bangalore Water Supply, average stay is 14 to 18 months. They're very bright people, but they know they're inheriting a very complex problem. They know they're not going to be there, and nothing much happens. So we are not making much progress, not significant progress in the water area. So we need to start looking at how we can reimagine water management, agricultural water management, industrial water management, domestic water use. They're all in bad shape. Nobody, for example, if I ask an Indian utility how much water a human being needs to lead a healthy and productive life, it's about 75 liters. But why do we need 125 to 130 liters in many parts of the country, and 40 to 50% leakage from the system? So we have problems everywhere in the water management. And my view is, unless these problems are done, not only Brahmaputra, but India's water and energy problems cannot be solved. And it is through discussions like this, we have to look at what are the broader issues involved and how we can do that. Yes, we can solve the problem, but getting the political support is very difficult. And even if I get political support, the next minister that comes, at one time, one Indian water minister lasted all of one day. Okay, so the question is, how do we get continuity in our politicians? The secretaries, joint secretaries, they leave within 2 years. Okay, 2 to 3 years maximum. We need people who have knowledge of water, committed to the water, and can influence water for a long time. That is not happening. And unless that happens, I don't see much good future, not only in Brahmaputra, but also the rest of India. We might publish a lot of papers, but with this type of institutional arrangements, we have a problem. So these are some of my thoughts. India's water, to sum up, India's water problems are solvable. Brahmaputra water problems could be solved. Brahmaputra has a tremendous source of water and energy. India lacks both. So instead of looking how to develop good dams, construct them quickly, we are, at least from what I see in India, all the water infrastructure constructions are being delayed. Delayed because of poor planning, poor management. NHPC says that because of a lot of institutional problems, the cost and the time of all the dams they build have been significantly overdone. And yet, we are not using, in India, as far as I know, no one is using, no water department, no water ministry, the state or the federal level, central level is using digitalization, sensors, artificial intelligence, and big data analytics to construct dams. I've been advising China. The last visit I made was 4 months ago. They invited me to attend the opening of the world's largest dam at 314 meters high, the highest dam, which they constructed in 6 years, okay, by using extensively artificial intelligence and digitalization. India has that expertise, but we are still using old way of doing things, and there is, my view is, status quo mostly wins over major revolutionary approaches. So unless we do this type of developments, which India has the expertise, change some of the institutional arrangements, I'm afraid India's water future does not look very bright. And that is my personal opinion. I've shared it with the current Prime Minister. He knows what I think. I've been asked to help Niti Aayog. Let us see to what extent the institutions will allow us to make some change, major radical changes in water management. I'm not very optimistic that it will happen or happen very quickly. So let us see what happens. So that finally, I think you mentioned, Dr. Das, you are planning a meeting on Brahmaputra in Hayai Indian International Center in Delhi. I'd strongly encourage you to do that and invite all the top brasses from Delhi. Use your personal influence to bring them to listen to this dialogue and see what can be done, what is not being done, and how India is losing not only money, employment, everything compared to many other countries of the world. So the future is bright, but we have to make some breakthroughs. And unfortunately, unless some catalysts like you make some changes within the government or force the government to make some changes, I don't see much will happen, because we are going on an incremental path for the last century. That's all from my side.